What is going on, everybody? BobbyFi and MNF Sheets. We're going to be talking a little NFL Showdown. And we did our NBA video, but for those of you guys who haven't watched it, it was before Cole Anthony and Gary Harris was ruled out, which is going to make all the RJ Hampton, Jalen Suggs, Franz Wagner, even in a bad matchup, all those guys are going to be awesome value. So I wanted to point out that. Sheets, how was the doctor? And then let's get into to this NFL stuff.
No pneumonia, so all good.
That's great.
And Evan just sucked out really hard. He didn't even realize it. Was that my brother-in-law doesn't even realize what just happened, because if I was going to have pneumonia, he was going to have to do Thanksgiving.
Oh so man, he really did well.
He didn't even notice. One other thing I forgot to brag about, by the way, not even to brag, but just because it just it worked out. Also, was it from NFL yesterday? Dude, I want to just say thank you for all of the just terrible, hopeless people who picked Tennessee in Survivor yesterday. It was literally the nut low play.
Oh my God, yeah.
And I talked about it in my Survivor video that you can play literally anybody on the whole board as long as you don't play Tennessee, because that's literally the worst play you could ever make.
Oh man, what a call.
And 30% of the people took Tennessee, and they can subscribe next year. So I had a couple of anxious moments with Cleveland, I have to say.
Yep.
Cleveland is really an atrocity. And they did their best, but Detroit's just a little bit better at losing than Cleveland is.
Right.
They're a lot more experienced. So there's no fault in it. When Cleveland's when Detroit's an 0 whatever team, they're down by 6 points in my territory at 4th and 1, and they kick a field goal in the fourth quarter. I'm like, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
It's actually shocking to see that. I know. I could not believe that was happening.
So I got that home, and then hey, you know what? As we transition into this, the only thing left to do, there's about 10 to 15% that have Tampa against the Giants, which obviously they're a big favorite. They rate to win. But if they don't, that's more people in Survivor that go by the wayside, and I can root for my Giants with full vigor. And that's one of the things about this battle playing Survivor is usually playing against bad teams, and the Giants are usually a bad team. So I find myself rooting against the Giants a lot in Survivor, but now I'm fully rooting for them. So that's good news.
Yeah. No, it's I hear you. How many people are left in this thing?
Well, there are a lot of different pools.
Well,
so the one Jack and I are in, the Circa one in Vegas. That's like down to 100 people now, from like 6,000.
Wild.
That's like 6 million in the pool there.
That is crazy.
Yeah, I mean that'll end up chopping, but dude, I'll be more than happy to take a piece of it. Dude, you ready for this? This is the sicko thing. So there are 2 sicko weeks. It's 1 pick a week until now, and this week in Thanksgiving, you have to make 2 picks, and one of them has to be from Thursday. Like, so you have literally 3 games to choose from. So you have Dallas -7 against the Raiders. You have Chicago -4 or whatever against Detroit. And then you have Buffalo -4 against New Orleans. And who do you think the most popular team on the slate is going to be?
I don't know.
The correct answer is Chicago.
Oh my God.
Because everybody owns them, right? And Dallas has a lot of attrition. People have used them before. Buffalo used them before. And so what happens is it actually becomes a positive EV play to play Detroit in Survivor. You know what I mean? Like if you wanted to do that. Do people have the balls to do it? We're gonna find out. But it's and then not only that, but then you have the pick of like just terrible choices Thursday, and then the same thing Christmas. So there's that pool, run a couple of others. But you know what? I read in a fortune cookie the other day, last night actually. Like luck is the result of good preparation, and that's what Survivor is really all about.
No, that's awesome. I mean, this has been the most unpredictable year of all time. I mean, Sheets going in. You realize yesterday. There had never been a time past week 6 where no team had a 2-game winning streak. And going into yesterday's week 11, not one team had won 2 games. I mean, during the season they had, but not going into the week. There was no teams that had won consecutive games going into yesterday's game. That's absolutely mind-boggling to me.
All right, so let's get after it. And this is like, I don't really like this slate. You want to know why? Because I've heard of everybody on it. It's I like playing the 600 guys that no one's heard of before, but this is everybody on my board I've heard of to some degree. So, but we'll try to make heads or tails of it.
Yep. Yeah. So I mean, and we still have some Barkley. I'm assuming is going to play, but he's questionable technically. So there's some things that could happen here. My overall take on this game is I think that I like the under.
That's interesting.
It feels a little higher than I'd want to go total.
What is it, 50?
Yeah, it's 50, 44, 49 and a half.
Okay.
I've been doing pretty well with the under ones. I actually, my buddy yesterday asked me for a bet. He's got a lot more money than I do. And I told him that I thought the safest bet on the board would be the under in the Cleveland-Detroit game.
Oh, I know. That almost looked too easy, right?
It was like a lock. And he bet, so he went out there and he bet 16,500 on it, collected 15,000 and was very thankful. Again, he has a lot more money than I do to just put 16.5 on a race.
And he's got 16,000, he's got 15,000 more than you now.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. All right, well, let's get, so what are we going to do here, Sheets? Like, it's a weird game. I actually feel like, I even was thinking like there's 11 points is a lot for Tampa Bay, but I also could see them just completely beating the hell out of them. But then you get that whole Brady against the Giants thing back in your head, you know what I mean? And I'm going, maybe there's something. I know it's a totally different team and it should have no bearing whatsoever, but it just feels like a big spread. And I can't figure out exactly who I would want to captain on this slate that would be low owned. I feel like everybody I keep coming up with is going to be really popular. Maybe I could be talked into a Tyler Johnson captain. Who are you looking at and who's sort of standing out for you? And then we'll get into some of the cheaper plays and stuff like that.
First of all, I'd like to give my take on the game as well. I think the Giants, as pretty much all teams this year, honestly, I've just been fighting all year. I mean, they're very, very live. It seems every freaking week. They got to win in New Orleans. They just always seem to be in games, and they've been in games. They were in that Kansas City game right to the end with no players. I mean, they lost all their receivers, and they were just right in that game. They're very game, this Giants team, and they do pick up Barkley. Now, unfortunately, though, they're running into a situation where Tampa's coming off a loss, and they're probably going to get slugged. Yeah. So I feel as though Tampa is going to impose on them. Mm-hmm. But I mean, they don't have the Vax faker in the game, right? AB still out, right?
Yep.
But they got but Godwin's back. I mean, I think, and their defense is really good. I think Tampa is going to have a little bit too much, but I don't think that they're going to be in a situation to like create this impossible game script. In other words, I think the Giants are going to get to use their players. They're going to get to use Barkley if they want to. Tampa's going to have to use their receivers. They're going to have to use all their guys. So I don't think it's a game where you could game script somebody out of your lineups. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, as far as captains go, I mean, Brady's probably I guess Brady would be the top guy to put in captain.
Yeah, that would be the chalk one. I don't tend to like to play quarterbacks as captains in general. So I would try to I personally will try to avoid that. I think I would give maybe a little bit of an edge to Godwin over Evans, but I think it's close between those two who are considered. And then I was thinking about Fournette, but these are all going to be those are going to be your chalkier captains today. And I don't think that Daniel Jones is necessarily the wrong answer either, by the way.
He's got that rushing upside, man.
That's right. And the running upside and the fact that they're going to have to be throwing the ball, just think by the nature of the slate. I think that's kind of interesting. So without knowing for sure whether Booker or Barkley are for sure where they're at, who's in and who's not, and all that stuff, it's a little tricky early in the day, as these often are. But I kind of like these prices on these Giants receivers. So maybe you could play a Daniel Jones with two of these guys, or you could play Slayton. Slayton's sort of thin because he's had a couple of bad weeks, but I mean he's 3,200. It's a little cheap.
I don't think he's thin at all. I mean, Shepard's still out, right?
Yeah, Shepard's still out. You do have Galladay and Tony both to play tonight. They've had some time off. I think Tony would probably be my favorite guy to use as a potential captain. But I'm right there with Galladay too. I think that's where I think you want to be living. Usually, I don't like taking running backs too much against Tampa Bay, but we have a very reasonable price on Barkley. I'm probably still not going to do it, and I don't feel like I feel like the game script is going to lead me to want to play Fournette, but I don't want to use him as a captain. So I think one of these Giants as receiver. With maybe a little bit of an edge for Tony over Galladay, but I'm good with both of them. What do you think about those guys?
Yeah, look, I do like Slayton in general. I think that he's always a good target for. He was always a guy that Daniel Jones liked to throw it to. So he's cheap. I mean, I just kind of for funsies, like threw him in the captain with all the other receivers and threw out Barkley and I threw Brady in with one of the stud receivers. You could do that obviously like really, really easily. And before you go and say that's going to be really chalky because you do it easily, remember this type of lineup doesn't have Barkley in it. So, I guess all lineups with the Giants without Barkley have got to be somewhat different.
I don't think he's going to be like crazy popular as of right now. I mean, I think he'll be popular, but I don't think he's going to be like 80% or something. I think he'll be
no, nothing like that.
Yeah.
But if I had to rank, remember Galladay. I mean, he used to be good. You know what I mean? Like he's a good receiver.
He is a good receiver.
So I don't know. I every time I don't want to be biased because I'm rooting for the Giants this game. But it just feels that though that they're, I don't know, it just feels that they're live for some reason and that they're going to score some points. I don't know how they're going to score points because their Bucks are tough, But I just feel as though they have their weapons back,
Yeah, they also had the week off and got healthy and everything. So I would agree with you that they're very live. But I mean, I guess if we're going to start ranking some of these guys, I have Tony, Galladay, Slayton in that order. But I don't mind I wouldn't mind using a little more Slayton if I think he's going to be lower on. But I don't think that's going to be the case. Your cheap weirdo play would be Colin Johnson, who I think is totally viable at 200.
Ooh, I don't even have him. Who's that?
He's the other receiver for the Giants.
Okay.
Sort of the fourth receiver as it stands. Although you could argue that John Ross could be that. I think Colin Johnson's gotten a little bit more work this season, but it's if you need the 200 guy, and I'm not sure you're necessarily going to on this slate. Who are some of the other cheapos that maybe you're coming up with?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like there weren't too many cheapos, especially on the Giants. The only one I have is Slayton. I think the interesting thing is when you go over to the Buck side, to get a little different over there. I think maybe because I wanted to ask you. You mentioned Fournette, but this Giovanni Bernard gets work sometimes. Like every once in a while, I look over at the screen, I look back, and it's Giovanni Bernard getting in the end zone. Every once in a while, I'm expecting someone else there, and Ronald Jones is getting the ball, whatever it is. So maybe I don't know. What do you think of those the secondary running backs for the Bucks instead of, or maybe alongside of Fournette in some lineups?
Bernard has played in games where they've really been in trouble. His touchdowns came against the Saints, which that was a game they lost. The Rams, a game they lost. And then Miami was the other one, which they won. That was the one that they sort of, put it on him a little bit earlier. But he, in that game, he didn't have like a huge game. He just happened to score a touchdown. In general, when he's gotten his work, it's been when they've been behind because that's where they're using him in a catching up role, a third down back. He'll still get some work. So I'm okay. I'm open to Bernard, but I think I would rather take a shot on the lower owned and cheaper. And Bernard's going to be low owned too. But the even lower owned, maybe if Gronk is in, maybe one of the other tight ends is something I was considering doing.
Oh, that's interesting.
Howard or Brate. And you could go to Howard for the price at 1.2. And I don't think anybody will play Brate, but if you need a guy just to possibly get a touchdown, he's a little bit expensive for his role because they didn't know about Gronkowski, whether he's healthy. But I could see him getting another red zone target or two. They'll run little plays for him down there near the goal line. He got his touchdown last week. And so that was what I was thinking to maybe get a little bit off the board. But my main thing to try and get off the board is going to be trying to be whichever Giants receiver I think will be the lowest owned captain. That's probably it, or Daniel Jones on the other side.
Yeah, again, ownerships are really, really fragile in Showdown and even early. Obviously Brady would be the top owned guy. And then my second highest, if I have to look at ownership for a minute, I have a tie between Fournette and Godwin actually. For the next highest, especially in the captain. Yep. And then I have Evans and Daniel Jones and Barkley all together, actually.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's weird. I didn't realize that Gronk has become like actually the guy there again. I thought that he was just the guy that we played at low ownership a couple of times. I didn't even realize.
Well, he's been hurt. He's been out.
Okay.
But the game.
I like OJ Howard. I like playing.
Yeah. And we aren't even 100% sure that Gronk's going to play tonight. I think he's going to, but.
And as you mentioned before, like Brady likes to get it to Brady sometimes.
Yeah, Brady and I think that then you have Howard who could get in there for some plays, and also we don't know how many plays Gronk's going to play even if he does play. So these guys are going to have some opportunities. So I think they're sort of my little let's get weird kind of plays for this particular slate. And I don't think anybody's playing either of those guys. I do think there'll be a lot of points, fantasy production from, I mean, Godwin, Evans, and at least one of the Giants receivers, I think are going to have really big games, which, like I said, sort of keeps the quarterbacks out for me, except for possibly the rushing upside of Daniel Jones. But if you did something like that, and you could play one of those guys, and then play the just flex one of the Tampa Bay tight ends, and maybe you get the touchdown upside on your side, and that's what I would try and do, something like that.
Speaking of tight ends, what about the Giants tight ends between Ingram, who's obviously the logical play, and maybe Kyle Rudolph to get some secondary routes or something like that? What do you think of either of them?
Yeah, I think Ingram would be the desirable one for me, but I don't really love them as much this week. I think Rudolph actually Rudolph's a really good cheap option. If he does stay low owned, I would probably go do that, maybe ahead of these Tampa Bay guys. But I sort of like the Giants receivers a little bit better because of the coverage on the outside. You have really good linebackers in Tampa Bay. Doesn't mean like in one game anything could happen. You're just looking for one score from Rudolph or from Ingram to get a few catches. I think I just prefer, like, Ingram is, I don't want to play Ingram over Galladay or Tony, but at the same time, people are going to feel the same way. So he's going to be probably half as owned as those guys are. But I don't mind taking a shot with Kyle Rudolph. I kind of like that, actually. I think it's a good.
I don't. It's so funny. I was about to say, it doesn't feel like a defense week, but I mean, you put Daniel Jones in a situation when he's a 12-point underdog. I mean, I guess your Tampa defense has to be in play somewhat, right?
Absolutely. 100% of Tampa Bay defense is in play for me. I actually think the Giants defense is in play too.
Don't laugh, man. I mean, I've been saying this, like Brady hasn't really done it all the time, but he's just cocky and confident enough, as he should be with his 17 rings, that he'll throw balls that maybe he shouldn't sometimes,
Yep.
It's
he had multiple picks back-to-back games. They did have one pick six in there too. That's interesting. I think I would, like I said, I prefer the. That's the other thing is that he will take a sack, so you're going to have some sack upside for them as well. So if you can get your defense, the Giants at 2,800 to score 10 fantasy points or 9 fantasy points or 8 fantasy points or somewhere in that range, I think that's actually pretty damn good for that price. So that's an interesting play.
And the Giants have been sending people blitzing against Tom Brady for his whole career.
Yep.
That's been their modus operandi, whether they have the talent to do it or not. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that does create some variance on the good side for them and the bad side. But yeah, maybe. And with respect to kickers, you know what? This is it's so funny. I don't talk about my season-long league enough, and not enough. I don't talk about them, but season-long league because I put like no effort into it. I did my draft. I made like literally like 5 moves the whole season. It's like a $50 buy-in league. The one guy's I've had suck up every single week, including when he was on bye and I forgot to take him out. Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of those. I ran with Jalen Hurts the same thing. I had Jalen Hurts every single week, and I think one time he was on a bye, I forgot to take him out, so I just lost that week. That's fine. I'll move on to the next one. But yeah, so the kickers, I guess the kickers are okay. But I have the feeling that if I get to them, I'll get to them. But I do think that the skill players are good enough for both these sides that they're probably going to get some touchdowns, if anything.
I agree with that, and I would, and if you're going to pick between the kickers, I would pick Suckup over Gano barely. I think it's really close between the two of them.
Okay.
But I agree with you. I still think there's double-digit upside for the kickers, though. I mean, you can get 10 fantasy points, 12 fantasy points out of these guys. That's definitely possible.
Yeah. So what I would do is probably what I do in seriously most of these showdown slates, and I did it last night too. I did well. I'll probably end up with like these 5-1 builds, with a whole bunch of Tampas, and probably one guy from the Giants, whether it be Daniel Jones, whether it be Barkley, whether it be whatever. And that's you. I mean, it's been working for me, if you want to know the truth, especially with these. It didn't even matter whether it's the big blowout games or there's close games. Those types of builds have seemed to work for me. So that's where I'm probably going to end up, honestly. And I'll probably have one hoodoo in there, whether it be, who'd you mention, Colin Johnson or something like that. Probably some zero-ish guy that probably has no chance. But if he does get there, then that's better. That opens up the rest. The guy maybe like even maybe not that fancy. Maybe a guy like OJ Howard or Ronald Jones, you know what I mean? Like guys like that. You know, remember that for a guy that's, well, forget the 1800s, the guys that are 200, for them to do anything for you, you need like literally like one catch.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
or none. Hey, look, the winner of the
what about this guy? This guy always has a big catch. John Ross. He's 400, and well, he didn't do anything this last game, but 2 games in a row before that, he had a couple of big things. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
John Ross is someone to throw
behind Cullen Johnson on the depth chart, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, he is?
I can double check that. Well, remember Tony was out, Galladay was out.
Oh, right. That was when they were all out.
Right. So I actually, I'll do a little more studying on that, and maybe we can talk about it at 6. Are you going to be able to make it at 6, or
yes.
I don't mind?
First of all, neither of them had a target last week. So.
Yeah, no, that's true. I know. I just am trying to figure out who in the depth chart is a little higher.
Yeah.
I'll take a look at this.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely be there at 6, and then I'll be there at 8 for the other thing. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, good luck to everybody out there. We hope you crush it, and we will hopefully be of more help at 6 when we know exactly who's playing and all that stuff, and Gronk and all that nonsense. Anyway, good luck, everybody.
Sounds good. All right. I'll see you.